My mother felt that paintings have a life of their own, and that our lives are shaped by the paintings that are present in our lives. She died in 1999. She was 95 years old. So her work reflects almost all of the major art movements of the 20th century because she lived through them all.
I do think that she was a pioneer. Definitely a pioneer in, independent women making their way, living an independent life, creating a great work that was so different from anything. She had a lot of originality. I think it gives us a real role model. The images that she shows in her art have these women riding bare-breasted on horses. They're just having a wonderful life. And all the women in that particular series, they're all Amazons. They have very long legs and they're very physically adept. They're amazing. I love that they have small heads and big legs, that they're out of proportion because she was emphasizing their physical prowess, which wasn't really feminine in those days. It was really unique and, very original.
Well, downstairs is where we keep most of the painting. And when we bought this place, there was a playroom down here. And I decided, since I didn't really need a playroom, that I would create a little gallery for my mother's work. And nobody ever succeeded in getting my mother to explain work like this because she was so contemptuous of any question. She would, people would say, well, what did you mean by this, Juanita? Or what does this symbolize? Or why is this cat staring so, this Siamese cat is looking so angry? And, my mother would she would just dismiss such questions with contempt because she thought that they were coming from such a deep-seated ignorance that there was no use in an artist explaining or trying to explain.
She's a quirky artist because of her life, too. These women were eccentric, but she probably went the furthest with her lifestyle. Going alone to live in a Bedouin community as a white woman in the 1930s is really independent and bizarre.
She was a good horsewoman, so she fit right in with the Bedouins. She fell in love with Bedouin culture, and she began to live with a tribe called the Ouled Nail, who were quite famous. The women especially were famous for their dancing. The tribe was famous for being matriarchal, which was unusual among the Bedouins. My mother lived with the Ouled Nail, but the French and the other Europeans disapproved, and so my mother, in many ways, dissociated herself from the European community. And she twice crossed the Sahara with Bedouins to Egypt and the Sudan. And she was very much interested in Sufism, Islamic mysticism, and she spent a great deal of time in Sufi zawiyas, or Sufi compounds.
The women of Surrealism are important because they were doing this kind of work. Every kind of Eastern religious practice, every kind of transformational psychic exploration. They were real explorers of the unknown. And they brought forth their images from what they explored into their work. It's just so rich and so extraordinary that they did it and persisted even though they were discredited and eliminated for so long.
Life in general was difficult for an independent, creative woman between the two wars and shortly after, through the 50s.
She was a difficult woman, but I think that women had to be really difficult, maybe not as difficult as some of them were, but they had to be really strong and feisty or they would not have had lives at all.
They didn't fit the traditional roles they were supposed to follow. Romance, marriage, households, children.
My mother really never saw an establishment, I think, that she didn't want to kick. Whether it's the art establishment or whether it's the press or the politicians, right from the get-go, it's how she lived her life. She did it when she was a model. She did it in Algeria and got into trouble with the French colonial regime. My fondest memory of her, even though she practically became a fascist in her old age, was going to Union Square Park with her and watching her throw eggs at cops. I know in retrospect that that's really the person she was. She just always had an impulse to throw eggs. I told my mother very late in her life, well, you did confront the issues and you paid a horrible price. It was a very exclusive male club, and it was very difficult for women artists to cope with it. She, like many other women, was walled out of the art world. I think she liked to be around her paintings. She liked the act of painting them and of thinking about them. But I think she felt that having to think about her career and how she would be remembered was just a big pain in the neck for her. This approach was essentially Sufic. I'm sure that one of the things the Sufis told her in Algeria, that when you become a dervish, which is a Sufi adept, a Sufi disciple, what is your job? Is your job to spout knowingly about the divine? Is your job to recite the 99 names of God? No. Your job is to disappear.
It's harder to research these women. They disappear through other duties, household duties, motherhood, or even if they don't have children, they disappear. That's even worse. If they don't have children and there's no one to leave the art to, often it just gets thrown out.
Well, this is the storage area where, well, there may be 500 to 600 oils, acrylics, drawings, charcoal, pencil, ink. I know in my heart, after a lifetime of living among artists, that this is work that really ought to be seen. I feel this grand compulsion to do something about it. And also I feel this terrible inadequacy. I'm 76 now, and I don't really know what's going to happen to the work when I'm gone, and I don't really have anyone in my family or in my life other than my wife Marilyn who could carry this work on. I'm just the one to do it, and I have to.